welcome to class. I'm Dr. Greg Parsons, and I'll be your instructor and facilitator for this particular class. This session is devoted to an overview and introduction to the class. I'll be talking about the syllabus, what the required readings are, what the schedule is, when assignments will be due. I'm basically giving you an idea about what the expectations are for your performance and my performance in this particular class. I'm glad to see that you were able to find your way into the video classroom. You will be seeing more of this throughout the class as I try to keep students up to date and prepared for their assignments. So for the next few minutes, sit back and enjoy yourself. This is the easiest part of the class, is watching me do my performance. So glad to have you here, and we'll be talking more later. Now, the first thing you always look at when you go into the class is the home page, because this is where I would post announcements. Okay, so whenever you go into your class to start some work, look at announcements, so if anything has changed, you don't want to miss it. Next, here's a little bit of information about me, and rather than spend a lot of time talking about what you can read there, I think this will serve as an introduction biography for me, and similar to what I'd like to see you put in your introductions, so that we know how you prefer to be called, what your nickname or name you want to go by, a little bit about your background, what you're looking forward to with your DBA, and so on. Just a little bit of information. Let us communicate more freely. Now we're going to get into the syllabus, and as you know, working with Blackboard, many times when you try to copy something into the text editor, the formatting kind of changes. So what I've done is I've also supplied a downlink to allow you to download the syllabus in its Word format directly to your computer. But it's listed here also, and we'll be going by this to talk about the assignments. The course materials are simply the publication of the Manual from American Psychological Organization. This is your APA formatting. You should have this for previous classes. There are no textbooks for this class. We'll be using the assigned readings, which are from refereed journal articles in the Kaiser Online Library. The grading system is a standard Kaiser A, B, C, and F. Based upon these particular percentages, and when you go into gradebook and look at your percentage, it'll give you an indication of how you stand. But this needs to be combined also with the assignments that are coming up. So the particular weight or percentage of worth of an assignment is also something that needs to be considered. For grading and evaluation purposes, we'll use 8 weekly discussions worth 2.5% each. I'll be talking a little bit about that a little later in this presentation. And then we'll have a series of papers starting in week 2, which may seem early, but I want to see a sample of your writing so we have a chance to improve it over the next few weeks. Then there'll be a follow-up paper in week 4, another paper in week 7, and then kind of a wrap-up paper in week 8. And the assigned percentages are shown there. So obviously the weeks 4 and 7 papers are worth quite a bit. They're the important ones. The week 2 paper is kind of a lower percentage because it's, again, kind of a sample, and I don't penalize you for what you don't know, but by the time you get to week 4 and week 7, I expect you to be making improvements in your writing. Late penalties when you turn in a paper past the due date within the first week, it's a 10% penalty. Within 2 weeks of the due date, 20%, and so on. It's all meant to encourage you to pay attention to the schedule and to realize that other students are working according to these deadlines, and unless you have a special circumstance and you discuss it with me ahead of time, you're going to get a penalty for turning in late work. Okay? Plagiarism is always a continual issue. Of course, it comes in various forms. There's intentional, where you turn in somebody else's paper as your own, or you turn in a work that you did previously in a different class in response to a requirement in this class. That's called plagiarism, plagiarizing yourself. And then there's unintentional plagiarism, where you thought you had correctly referenced an author, but you forgot to do it. and those are more minor infractions, but still we're trying to teach you to avoid those sort of situations, so always try to reference your material correctly. There's a graduate student incomplete policy, which means if you're approaching the end of the class and it appears for a valid reason that you will not be able to complete all the coursework, we have a option of going with an incomplete, which will add an extra 4 weeks to the completion date of the class. You turn in all the work for the course within 4 weeks after the class ends, and then you will receive a grade based upon all the work that's been submitted. The downside is the highest grade you can get is a B, because of course you're getting more time compared to everybody else. But in certain situations where there's just absolutely no way you could complete the work because of an illness, because of a death in the family, something that you couldn't get around, here's an option that we can work with. But you have to get in touch with me ahead of time to let me know that you're going to need an incomplete. In the Start Here section of the class, you'll find some videos that I've already uploaded for your viewing pleasure. It's just a link that goes to the YouTube session. Now, some of these you might have seen before in previous classes. I tend to reuse the same ones. However, during the class I may be adding some more also, and I'll make an announcement of that in the announcements section. So let's take a look at Week 1 assignments, since they'll be very similar to what you'll see throughout the class. Every class, every week has its own little topic that we're trying to cover. In this one we're looking at the history and the overview of the field of strategic management. And then there'll be some assigned readings, generally between 6 and 9, something in the order of that. Those are required. Those you have to read, and they have to show up in your discussions and in your papers. Of course, in addition, you can select some additional papers that you would like to include as part of your discussion and in your papers, but these are required. And then finally, the assignment for week number 1 is a discussion post. You're to read, synthesize, and review the assigned readings and also any additional peer-reviewed journal articles. And the topic is how the field of strategic management is different and how it evolved from other fields within the management area. Okay, so that's going to be the discussion topic, and again, you're required to use the readings for this week. That's what they're there for. We're not looking really for your opinion. We're looking for what the experts have to say about the subject, and then how well you can interpret it and synthesize it and then write about it. So how to do it? Well, most of you should be very familiar with putting in your discussion post. The one thing I did want to mention is recently the Kaiser University Graduate School has made a decision that discussion posts do not have to be run through SafeAssign. You can simply write it up and post it, and it's up to me to determine whether you're copying somebody else or copying from a website someplace. Okay, so you do not have to run it through SafeAssign, which means everything a little bit simpler, but still you should write the initial post in Microsoft Word, and you should understand that the assignment deals with a particular topic, and you want to make sure that you understand that. So you should watch the video. If you have questions about the topic or the readings, you should ask me a question in the Blackboard Ask Questions section. You can email, phone, or text me. You should, of course, be familiar with as much of the material as you can. Now, I realize because we're trying to get the first post in by Tuesday that trying to read all 10 or 9 or 8 articles by that time is usually very difficult. And consequently, the approach that I'd like you to take is kind of scan through the articles, look at the abstract, look at the maybe introduction, and pick a couple that you think would be good for your initial post and work with those. And then during the rest of the week, continue to read the rest of the articles and then use those in your posts as you start to respond and discuss things with other people. So by the end of the week, you should have read everything, but I don't really expect that you'll be able to read everything before your very first post. Okay? So you need to have a plan about how you're going to approach this, just the same as you would if you were going to write a paper. The first post should be substantial. It should be a presentation about how you view the material for the topic and the assigned readings. And you may find that you need to go back to the library to check on some more references to be able to really complete your first post. So you write your post in Word, you do all the revisions and grammar checking and spell checking and everything else, revise it so that when you turn it in, it looks like a reasonable presentation. And then, of course, you want to document your sources, so make sure that those references are posted at the end of your initial post. Then you go into the discussion section, and that'll take you here. Now you'll notice you don't have to go to Safe Assign. You can simply go right into the one discussion. Here you can create a thread. I would prefer that you create a thread rather than right on top of everybody else. It's difficult for me to kind of follow the discussion if it's kind of going back and forth between different threads. And then you put in a subject, and you copy and paste your post from Word into Blackboard. Now we realize, and I realize, that sometimes this messes up the formatting. Okay, so as long as it comes out readable, I'm not that terribly worried about it. Okay, so that's the approach. And then when you have it in there the way you want it, then hit submit, and you will be posted into the discussion. Again, I'd like to see your initial posts in. When I go into the class on Wednesday, I would like to see all your initial posts in the discussion for the week so we can start working with those. Okay. And then by the end of the week, you should have 3 additional posts on 3 different days. So a total of 4 posts, first one by Tuesday, and then a total of 4 on 4 different days. When you do your response posts, the intent is to develop a back and forth discussion. So you're going to talk, for example, in your first response post, you're going to respond to somebody what they had written in theirs. Now, normally you start out and say, I really liked your post, and this was did a great job, and so on and so forth. But if that's all you say, there's really no point to discussing anything. You simply said, I liked what you wrote. And somebody says, well, I liked what you wrote too. That's not really a discussion. That's not what the intent of the discussion for the week is. We want to get a back and forth dialogue going specifically about the material. So, for example, you might say, well, I agree with you about the relative immaturity of the strategic management field, but in the article, Supple states that the validity of the field shouldn't be based upon its age, but should be based upon the rigor and the theory. What are your thoughts? And as you can see, this would then stimulate a response and hopefully begin a dialogue about strategic management field and its validity as a academic discipline. Your response post can be short, similar to a normal conversation, but it's not a chat room. Remember to stay on topic. You don't have to follow the APA requirements as specifically as in your initial post, and you can write directly into the Blackboard text editor. However, I would prefer that you use the spell checker. There's a little thing like a check mark that allows you to check the spelling within your post. It doesn't do it automatically. You have to select it to make sure that you're not turning in stuff that has misspellings in it. You don't have to use additional references in every post. However, when you do, and I would think you should, you're going to base your opinions upon literature. You're not going to base it upon your experience at work, your experience in the military, your experience whatever. You're going to base it upon what the experts in the field say, as referenced in the required readings for the week. The objective is to show that you've done the reading. Otherwise, how am I supposed to know if you're reading the material? So that's one thing. And then it's beyond that to develop a dialogue, to go back and forth between each other in the classroom and between the students and the instructor to be able to dig deeper into these particular topics. The readings and the suggested discussion topic are the first step. Those get you going in the right direction. But really, to do a good job at this level, at a doctoral level, that's just the beginning. And you really need to be able to dig into some of these issues a lot deeper and find more sources that investigate particular aspects of the topic in much greater detail. The discussion should give the instructor an ability to ask additional questions, kind of steer the dialogues and the conversations into different directions, ask leading questions to investigate various areas more deeply. So it's really a point of allowing the instructor to teach in the classroom. Now, when we go to the actual grading of the assignments, if you turn in a paper and it's late, there's a penalty. For 1 week it's 10%, and 2 weeks it's 20%, so it's fairly easy to see that each week adds a 10% penalty. The way this class is set up is each discussion for the week will be worth 2.5%, and that'll add up for 8 weeks to a total of 20%. You'll have a paper due in week 2, which is worth 10%. This is a chance for me to see your writing and to start to give you feedback on your writing style. Then there's a bigger paper in week 4 that's worth 30%, another paper in week 7 that's worth 30%, and then a wind-up paper in week 8 that's worth 10%. Let's just take a quick look at what's coming up in week 2 since we're talking about the papers. In week 2 you'll be turning in a 5 to 7 page paper, which will be looking at the main theories in the literature from the required readings of the first 2 weeks. So in addition to the required readings, and there's going to be about 20 of them, I want you to look at least 5 more peer-reviewed journal articles on the topic and include those, weave those into your synthesis of the first 2 weeks of work. And I'd like you to, in addition, take the abstracts from those articles and paste the abstracts into the reference list. So not only do you have the APA reference, but it also shows the abstract. So anybody who wants to look at this can see, well, they use this article, and I can now look at the abstract to see which article they used or what the nature of that particular article was without having to track it down in the library. Okay? 5 to 7 pages means the body of the paper, starting with the introduction and concluding with the conclusion. It does not include the title page. If you use a separate page for an abstract, it doesn't include that. It doesn't include your references. Okay, 5 to 7 means the body of the paper. So that gives you an idea about the overall setup of the class. It shouldn't be that much different than other classes that you've seen. The main difference may be there's a bit more reading. However, don't freak out. You can do this. This is going to be something that faces all of you as you work closer and closer to dissertation time. You've got to do a lot of reading. You got to learn how to synthesize. You got to learn how to understand these crazy journal articles. And as you start to read more, you understand that journal articles take more time than simply reading a textbook. Textbooks are already digested for you and condensed, and you really don't have to dig very hard to understand what a textbook is saying. And you may have to go through a journal article several times. But a little bit of a hint, a lot of times you don't need to read the whole article. You really want to know what's in it, and that can be summarized by looking at the abstract and what's written there, and take a look at the conclusion, and then kind of scan through to see the various parts. You may find what you're looking for rather quickly. You're never going to have a test that asks you, what did this author say on, page 34 of the article. You're looking for what is important to you, what you're trying to take away from it, and consequently you've got to find ways to scan through these articles more rapidly than reading them word by word. So that's one key to success. Another key to success is these articles provide the resources that you'll be using when you work on your dissertation. So rather than simply throwing them away at the end of the class, you should start some sort of a catalog, some way of storing the APA references and a little bit of information about the article. So when you start thinking about research ideas and you say, well, I remember an article I read in strategic management class that had to do with this particular point. What was that? You don't want to go back to the online library and start searching again. You want to go to your little catalog and scan through it or pick through it, whether it's an Excel file or a stack of 3x5 index cards or however you want to do it. But you should have a summarized version of the information of all these articles that you've read. You will have read hundreds, if not thousands, of articles by the time you get to your dissertation. So need to have a way of organizing that information. Also, stay active in the discussions. Don't ignore a question or a comment. As I said, the intent of the discussions is to dig deeper into the particular topics. And because I'm leading the class and that's my objective, don't expect me to ignore the fact if you're not paying attention and you're not staying active in the class. So I will be telling you if I don't think you're paying enough attention to what your classmates are saying and you're not getting involved enough. It doesn't work that way. The videos that I put together are there to help you. Also, the Graduate Writing Studio will review your papers and help you with your writing. When I give you feedback, I expect you to pay attention to it and make changes to the way you're doing things. It doesn't do me any good to spend time grading papers and supplying comments if you're not responding to those. Don't be afraid to ask questions. You can use the Ask Questions format in Blackboard. You can email me, you can call me. Generally, I'm very easy to get in touch with, and I'm more than willing to answer your questions about things. There's no reason to start an assignment and then claim that you didn't understand what you were supposed to be doing. If you don't understand, give me a call, send me an email. And finally, before we finish up, we ought to have some sort of statement about how strategy works in the real world. And here we have our Dilbert. The boss says, our CEO has a new strategy, but it seems fairly vague. The secretary asks, what will the engineers think about it? Oh, engineers, they don't care about this stuff. So what exactly does a middle manager do? Well, we're the glue that binds the apathy to vague objectives. So until next time, in our first week in strategic management theory, goodbye, good luck, and let me know if you have any questions. I'll see you in class.